I welcome you to my course. This course has been designed keeping the auditor's point of view on the ISO 27001 ISMS requirements and controls. I will share all my real-time experience that I have encountered during my long-time career of auditing different firms or organizations. This course will also act as the handbook for the organizations that want to get ISO 27001 certified. So, about me. I am a charter accountant by education and an experienced lead auditor, having experience of over 15 years. I am a certified ISO 27001 lead auditor and a certified CISA, that is, Certified Information Security Auditor. I have audited organizations from different sectors / domains. As you prepare for your online program, it's very important to have a coherent and consistent study plan for learning, reading the material, and using the materials together to support your learning program. You're never going to learn the program just from listening to me, or just from reading the material, or just from reading your course manual. It's really a combination of all those things taken together that will make you successful. It's very important within each of the major or chapters to take the time to review the learning objectives and understand the terms and concepts. When you have questions, please join the online mentoring community. Bring your questions there so we have an opportunity to support you. The main body of ISO/IEC 27001 formally specifies a number of mandatory requirements that must be fulfilled in order for an Information Security Management System, ISMS, to be certified compliant with the standard. All the mandatory requirements for certification concern the management system rather than the information security controls. For example, the standard requires management to determine the organization's information security risks, assess them, decide how those risks are to be treated, treat them, and monitor them, using the policies and procedures defined in the ISMS. ISO/IEC 27001 is one of the world's most popular standards, and this ISO certification is very sought after, as it demonstrates a company can be trusted with information because it has sufficient controls in place to protect it. At the end of the course, you will be able to 1. Design and implement an ISMS complying with all the mandatory elements specified in the main body of ISO/IEC 27001. 2. Identify and assess the information security risks facing those parts of the organization that are declared in scope for your ISMS. 3. Systematically check and record the status of your security risks and controls. 4. Once your ISMS is operating normally, the metrics are looking good, and you have amassed sufficient evidence, it can be formally audited for compliance with 27001 by an accredited certification body. What you'll learn: ISO/IEC 27001 Information Security Management Systems Controls. ISO/IEC 27001 Information Security Management Systems Requirements. ISO/IEC 27001 Information Security Management Systems Principles and Concepts. Fundamental aspects of getting your organization ISO/IEC 27001 certified. How to do information security controls audits. How to do information security controls consulting. Welcome. Good to have you back. So, let's discuss about the ISO 27001 ISMS security requirements. So, these requirements are context of the organization, leadership, planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, and improvement. We will try to understand these requirements in detail in further tutorials. I have created a separate tutorial for all these requirements. See you in the next lecture. Hi there, welcome to the lecture. So, let's discuss about the requirement, context to the organization. So, this requirement fundamentally mentions the need of having an organizational context, organization's ISMS objectives, and any issues that might affect its effectiveness. Interested parties identify interested parties including applicable laws, regulations, contracts, etc., and determine their information security relevant requirements and obligations. ISMS scope. Determine and document the ISMS scope. ISMS and establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve on ISMS according to the standard. Let's drill this topic down. Context of the organization is often misunderstood. Not so because identifying the organizational context has been found to be causing quite some confusion, but because it is rather vague. Let's discuss what must you consider for information security to help achieve business objectives. To cover this topic, let me take you to ISO 31000. That is the leading ISO standard for risk management. ISO 31000 considers and talks about the need for having a track on the internal and external issues. Let's discuss some examples of what should be considered for internal and external issues according to ISO 31000. Internal issues could be the factors under the direct control of the organization, such as organizational structure. Knowing the roles, accountabilities, and hierarchy in the organization will help define where to position the ISMS. Organizational drivers. The organization's values, mission, and vision expressed in its internal culture, policies, objectives, and strategies can help define its information security policies, objectives, and strategies. It is important to note that these factors are greatly affected by employees and other people working in the organization. Their perceptions and opinions should also be considered. The way the organization does things, knowing how processes work, both isolated and interconnected, how information flows, and how decisions are made will make it easier to integrate information security processes and controls with business operations and management activities. Available resources. Knowing what equipment, technologies, systems, capital, time, personnel, and knowledge you already have in your organization can help you guide your acquisitions, as well as the development not only of solutions, but also the competencies required to keep information secured. Contractual relationships. Understanding the relationships with suppliers and customers can allow an organization to include in the scope of its ISMS controls needed to better manage the customers and suppliers' requirements. See you in the next session. Hi there. Welcome back. External issues could be factoring an organization has no control over, but that it can anticipate and adapt to. Examples of external issues are market and customers trends. The increase in the adoption of cloud services is a good example of a trend that should be considered for an ISMS. Perceptions and values of external interested parties. Relationships with external parties are not limited to contracts. They have their own cultures that should be considered, as well as the beliefs of the people who work with them. Applicable laws and regulations. A good example is all the work performed by organizations to comply with the EU GDPR. Political and economic conditions. Elections. When public policy trends may change, and changes in local currency exchange rates should be monitored. Technological trends and innovations. Breakthrough technologies or innovations may render security controls useless or provide new ways to protect information. To access the external issues, McKinsey provides a 7S framework that will help to make a structured analysis for internal issues, which includes the assessment of strategy, structure, systems, shared values, skills, style, and staff. And this is my personal favorite. A fundamental structured analysis of external issues can be done through the PEST analysis, which identifies political, economic, social, and technological issues in your company's environment. So now, let's get back to ISO 27001. The organizational context includes external and internal issues relevant to the Information Security Management System, ISMS. Besides being a requirement of the standard, being aware of the organizational context can give an organization a clearer view of the most relevant issues, either positive or negative, for information security, allowing it to properly define the ISMS purpose, devise strategies, and allocate its resources where they will bring better results. As an auditor, I always get the query on how to document those issues. So, What is needed to be understood is that ISO 27001 does not require companies to document context of the organization through a separate document. Only certain elements of internal and external issues need to be documented. For internal issues, you must document the relevant ones as part of your information security objectives and results of the risk assessment and maintain records of the competence of your employees. For external issues, because of control compliance, it is mandatory to have a list of relevant legislative, statutory, regulatory, and contractual requirements. This list can help you with information security laws and regulations. It is not mandatory to document your PEST analysis or 7S framework analysis, but larger companies would normally create such documents when reviewing their business strategy. Smaller companies usually do not have them, but I'm sure most of the business owners / CEOs consider all these issues when they are figuring out how to compete in the market. So, if you work for a larger company, simply ask your corporate office to provide you with these documents. In smaller companies, make sure you talk to your CEO. Also, know your context to provide effective protection. By understanding the organizational context well, you can implement a robust ISMS that will cover the needs and expectations of the organization, customers, and other interested parties, and ensure that it will handle the most relevant risks, minimizing the occurrence and impact of incidents and increasing the use of opportunities. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome to the lecture. So, let's discuss about the next requirement, that is leadership. This requirement fundamentally talks about the leadership and commitment. Top management must demonstrate leadership and commitment to the ISMS policy. Document the information security policy, organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities, and assign and communicate information security roles and responsibilities. Let's discuss this now. As we know that the leadership and commitment in ISO 27001 is a relatively new control. So what is meant by leadership and commitment in ISO 27001, and how organizations can demonstrate this to auditors? Firstly, let's start by defining who should be responsible for demonstrating leadership and commitment in ISO 27001. The simple answer is the leadership. The leadership focus clause of ISO 27001 emphasizes the importance of information security being supported both visibly and materially by senior management. This clause identifies specific aspects of the management system where top management are expected to demonstrate both leadership and commitment. These include, but are not limited to: follow a top-down approach, accountability for the effectiveness of the management system, ensuring the policy and objectives are established and are compatible with the context and strategic direction of the organization, ensuring the integration of the management system are embedded into business processes. promoting the use of the process approach and risk-based thinking, ensuring adequate resources are in place, ensuring the management system achieves its intended results, engaging, directing, and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of the management system. My tip over here: if leadership are not actively involved, for example, they don't participate in management reviews or cannot demonstrate to the external auditor, this is taken very seriously during an audit, as the organization will almost certainly fail without leadership support. Also, auditors talk about the spirit of ISO 27001 coming from the top, and if they don't see that, they'll probably look much more deeply and skeptically during the audit. So, this question comes to be quite a lot of times. How can management demonstrate commitment? So, I say there are several ways management can demonstrate commitment towards the ISMS and towards security in general. Firstly, management must authorize and sign off for the budget and resources to manage security effectively. This is not simply a matter of giving it to IT to perform alongside their primary function. There must be clear dedication that security will be taken seriously, with dedicated personnel and reporting chains to the board. Secondly, senior management must provide input to security policies and strategy. Objectives should be defined in liaison with the board so that controls can effectively manage data. As policies can vary greatly dependent on risk appetite, sector and legal / compliance requirements, the board must communicate this to policy writers to ensure all personnel are operating in a manner aligned with the organization's overall direction. For example, the board may wish to become best of breed as a service provider, which in turn will require all systems to be available 100% of the time. This needs to be communicated in policy so IT can ensure enough controls are in place to make this a reality. Finally, management can demonstrate commitment by complying with all policies themselves and actively encouraging compliance to all personnel. It is no use defining policy requirements and then bypassing them as seniors. This is a poor example of leading by example. The key points for this control are summarized below for ease of reference. Policy objectives must be set and communicated from the top down. Security requirements must be aligned with the organization's overall objectives. Senior management must dedicate sufficient budget and resources to security operations. Management must comply and actively encourage all personnel to comply with security policies. Exceptions for seniors does not set an effective security culture in the organization. See you in the next lesson. Hi there, welcome to the lecture. Let's discuss about the next requirement, that is planning. So, this requirement speaks about the actions to address risks and opportunities, design / plan the ISMS to satisfy the requirements, addressing risks and opportunities, define and apply an information security risk assessment process, document and apply an information security risk treatment process, information security objectives and plans, establish and document the information security objectives and plans. Planning is important as it can foster efficient security cost management, compliance with laws and regulations, and a comfortable level of interoperability due to a common set of guidelines followed by the partner organization. It can improve IT information security system quality assurance, QA, and increase security awareness among employees, customers, vendors, etc. And it can increase IT and business alignment. It provides a process framework for IT security implementation and can also assist in determining the status of information security and a degree of compliance with security policies, directives, and standards. The goal of this requirement is to provide guidance on the planning and decision-making processes associated with ISO 27001 implementation, including associated costs, project length, and implementation steps. Let's discuss this. Before implementing ISO 27001, one needs to consider the costs and project length, which are further influenced by the detailed understanding of the implementation phases. Any cost is painful in tough economic times. In today's cloud computing environment, organizations that want to reduce costs without compromising information security are looking at ISO 27001 certification as a promising means to provide knowledge about their IT security. Implementation costs are driven by the perception of risk and how much risk an organization is prepared to accept. 4 costs need to be considered when implementing this type of project. Internal resources. The system covers a wide range of business functions, including management, human resources, HR, IT, facilities, and security. These resources will be required during the implementation of the ISMS. External resources. Experienced consultants will save a huge amount of time and cost. They will also prove useful during internal audits and ensure a smooth transition towards certification. Certification. Only a few approved certification agencies currently assess companies against ISO 27001, but fees are not much more than against other standards. Implementation. These costs depend largely on the health of IT within the organization. If, as a result of a risk assessment or audit, a gap appears, then implementation costs are bound to go up based on the solution implemented. On average, implementation of a system such as this can take 4 to 9 months and depends largely on the standard of conduct and quality and management support, tone at the top 6. The size and nature of the organization, the health/maturity of IT within the organization, and existing documentation. ISO 27001 requires a company to establish, implement, and maintain a continuous improvement approach to manage its ISMS. As with any other ISO compliance, ISO 27001 follows a plan, do, check, act, PDCA cycle as shown in figure. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome to the lecture. Let's discuss about the next requirement, that is support. So the requirement has been further classified into different parts such as competence and awareness. These two are very crucial when it comes to improving organizations' internal security. Competency. On issues to do with competency, ISO 27001 advises that institutions should cross-check the required competencies on every person whose responsibilities may affect the security information. To achieve competency, you need to avail job descriptions and ensure that each person is fit for the role described in terms of their education, their training, and their experience. Action should be taken to ensure that an organization acquire the best minds. There is need to have proper personnel files to act as reference and ascertain that the person is truly competent. Level of competency requirements differs from one post to the others within the organization, but those personnel who directly handle management of information security must be updated on ISO 27001 standards. That includes clear know-how of crucial security protocols, policies, techniques, and procedures. Knowing the process that involves risk assessment and treatment and make themselves aware of ISO/IEC 27001 controls found in Annex A and guidelines stipulated by ISO/IEC 27002. In addition, be updated on security needs on organizations' technology. Due to ever-changing human resource landscapes, continuous on-job training is necessary to maintain high level of competency to cope with these security information dynamics. Awareness. For an organization to enhance its security, awareness must be put into consideration. There is need to have awareness creation on matters to do with information security policies, their personal information security contribution, and the consequences that come as a result of failure to conform to security needs. By providing awareness, it will make personnel to consider information security as part and parcel of their daily undertakings. Creation of awareness can be achieved during training, organizations' social media posts, security information events, and probably using newspapers. It will be the responsibility of the communication department to come up with most effective awareness creation activities. Awareness can be done on monthly basis or generally on convenient periodic intervals. Communication. Organizations are supposed to cross-check the communication requirements both internally and externally. These requirements should be relevant to their security information management system.
The communication protocols should be able to tell on what to communicate, with who, and when, and the person responsible, and the process used to effect the communication. Having good and effective communication systems is very beneficial towards safeguarding the organization's security information. Effective communication can be horizontal. That involves staff communicating with each other, or vertical, that involving top management communication with middle or junior level management. There can be also external communication with stakeholders or suppliers. Documented information. Effective and efficient organization is supposed to have a proper documentation mechanism for security information. Documentation depends on the type of risk, the organization size, and the nature of operation and level of competence of staff. ISO 27001 provides the management documentation system, which is part of information security. Documentation can be done on paper or electronically, and ensuring that each document is given a description. In some organizations, it can be filed based on language. Documentation of security information should have protocols and procedures of compliance. A person should be assigned a special duty of reviewing and approves this information security before they are used as per on management systems and ISO 14001 control requirements ISO 9001. There should also be procedures on the disposal and retention of security information documents. The retention of obsolete documents should have a timeline, which sometimes informed by legal aspects of the organization. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome to the lecture. Let's discuss about the next requirement, that is, operations. Organization is required to have an action plan on security requirements, implementation, and control processes. Security assessment is done, and an action plan is formulated to address the outcome and achieve the goals of security information. In general, a clear plan is very crucial in every organization's security information system control and compliance. Organizations are very dynamic in terms of technology, personnel, suppliers, and subcontractors. And if these dynamics are not controlled, it will pose a great risk to information security. To be able to handle these dynamics and changes, organizations should have a mechanism to control them. This calls for planned change reviews and getting to know the impact of the change and the risk on information security. If there is any risk identified during assessment, then the organization should formulate measures to control them. In conclusion, comprehensive review of the impacts of the change must be undertaken, and appropriate measures put in place if the consequences will pose a risk to information security. All these can be attained by a proper change plan. See you in the next session.
Hi there, welcome back. Let's discuss about the next requirement, that is performance evaluation. So, performance evaluation is an integral part of the ISMS requirements. The requirement speaks about the monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. Monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate the ISMS and the controls. Internal audit, plan, and conduct internal audits of the ISMS. Management review, and undertake regular management reviews of the ISMS. So, the ISO 27001 requires organizations to evaluate how the ISMS is performing and how effective the information security management system is. For this, you will need to decide what needs to be monitored, agree on the methods you will use for monitoring and analyzing, when you will conduct the monitoring and measuring, decide who will conduct the measurement, decide when you will analyze the results of the measurement, and who will be responsible for evaluating the results. Let's discuss about internal audit. The International Standardization Organization will expect you to have carried out several planned internal audits of your information security management system. These audits will be reviewed independently by an external auditor at stage 2 of the accreditation. These audits should ensure that the information security management system meets the goals and objectives of the business, as well as the requirements of ISO 27001. The internal audit should plan, establish, implement, and maintain an audit program, define the scope and criteria, appoint the internal auditors, ensuring objectivity and impartiality, report results to the previously agreed staff member, ensure all results and comments are documented in the Information Security Management System. It is a responsibility of senior management to conduct the management review for ISO 27001. These reviews should be pre-planned and often enough to ensure that the information security management system continues to be effective and achieves the aims of the business. Let's discuss about the management reviews. This should include details of past management reviews with updated actions, any changes to internal and external issues that concern information security, feedback on any corrective actions, audit, and measurement results, interested parties, risk assessment results, continual improvements, opportunities for the ISMS. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome back. So, let's discuss about the next requirement, that is improvement. This requirement fundamentally talks about the non-conformity and corrective action and about continual improvement. Let's break it down further. The organization shall continually improve the effectiveness of the ISMS using the Information Security Policy, information security objectives, audit results, analysis of monitored events, corrective and preventative actions, and management review. Non-conformity and corrective action requirement outline that the organization shall act to eliminate the cause of non-conformities with the ISMS requirements in order to prevent recurrence. The documented procedure for corrective action shall define requirements for A. Identifying non-conformities. B. Determining the causes of non-conformities. C. Evaluating the need for actions to ensure that non-conformities do not recur. D. Determining and implementing the corrective action needed. E. Recording results of action taken. And F. Reviewing of corrective action taken. And that the organization shall determine action to eliminate the cause of potential non-conformities with the ISMS requirements in order to prevent their occurrence. Preventative actions taken shall be appropriate to the impact of the potential problems. The documented procedure for preventative action shall define requirements for A. Identifying potential non-conformities and their causes. B. Evaluating the need for action to prevent occurrence of non-conformities. C. Determining and implementing preventative action needed. D. Recording results of action taken. And E. Reviewing of preventative action taken. The organization shall identify change risks and identify preventative action requirements, focusing attention on significantly changed risks. The priority of preventative actions shall be determined based on the results of the risk assessment. Have you seen the continual improvement requirements somewhere else? Yeah, continual improvement is almost the part of every life cycle, process, etc. For example, ITIL has a stage called CSI, where you continually measure the performance of the IT service provider and then make improvements to processes, services, and infrastructure to increase efficiency and effectiveness. CMMI5 companies need to continuously improve on their people, process, and tool and technologies. They always need to try to optimize the existing processes. See you in the next session. Welcome to the lecture. So, let's discuss about the information security controls as defined and outlined by ISO IEC 27001. So these are A5, security policy. So, security policy fundamentally mentions the objective of the information security policy and different controls associated with it. You should know that the policies and procedures act as a pivot to safeguard the organization. If your organization has a weak policy that is not updated with time, the chances are less that your organization will have a control on different security activities within the organization. So, make sure to have a living security policy document along with revision history mentioned on the document as your first activity towards trying to achieve an ISO IEC accreditation. Out of many firms that I audited across the globe, I was taken aback by the fact that some organizations have not had a living security policy. Some had a security document which was last updated 3 years back. And as an ethical and responsible auditor, I had to mark the status on the security policy document as non-existent while submitting the report. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. A6, Organization of Information Security. So, Organization of Information Security fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for internal organization and mobile devices and teleworking, along with different controls associated with these. So, I have a question for you here. Whose roles and responsibilities are information security? I get multiple answers for this, like it's everyone's responsibility or it's management's responsibility. So, we will discuss this later in detail. A7, Human Resource Security fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies prior to employment, during employment, and termination and change of employment, along with different controls associated with these. When you join the firm and send across to work with a client, do you recall that you have to submit all the documents before getting onboarding to the client's team? You might have to sit idle for some days because during these days, your client conducts a background check on your experience. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. Asset management. So, asset management fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for responsibility for assets, information classification, and media handling, along with different controls associated with these. So, all the company assets like laptops, printers, and fax machines should be properly inventoried in the document, and this document should be updated timely. You can use asset information and configuration documents to inventory the assets and also mention the ownership of the asset within. Please define a policy of AUP, which is Acceptable Use Policy, so that the employee knows what to do and what not to do with the company assets. Information classification is critical to safeguard the information. Organizations should have the mechanism or software that should always prompt an employee to classify the working document when he or she tries to close the document. If you, as an organization, don't implement the information classification policy, even data loss prevention and digital rights management policy will be of less use. And based on my experience, information classification policy is so important, yet very undermined. Out of multiple clients that I audited, I had to mark the status on information classification policy document as unknown while submitting the report. We will discuss this later when we delve more into the specific controls. Good going. Keep up the momentum. You're doing well. Keep learning and see you in the next lecture. Hi there. Welcome back. It is good to see you again. A9, access control. So, access control fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for business requirements of access control, user access management, user responsibilities, and system and application access control, along with different controls associated with these. This part is very crucial. You should have a security principle around providing least access to your employees. Least here means that only the access granted will be what is required by the employee to complete his or her job function. No more, no less. Employees' daily job duties should be segregated. A person whose duty is to raise a purchase order should not be assigned the duty to approve the purchase order and pay for the invoice. In that case, the employee can complete the full procure to pay cycle, giving an organization a nightmare for an erroneous PO raised. So, an organization should have a policy to review its employees' access on a time-to-time basis. We will discuss this later when we delve more into the specific controls. A10, cryptography. So, cryptography fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for cryptographic controls along with different controls associated with it. Have a strong policy and control for cryptography, policy on the use of cryptographic controls and key management. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. A11, physical and environmental security. So, physical and environmental security fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for secure areas and equipment along with different controls associated with these. So, let's discuss what is a secure area. A secure area within an organization can be a server room where typically all the servers are kept operational in a rack type of arrangement and an electrical equipment room. So here is the catch. You need to segregate the access to be given to the employees. A default access should not grant access to both the secure areas and non-secure areas. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. Good going. Keep up the momentum. You are doing well. Keep learning and see you in the next lecture. Welcome. Good to have you back. A12, Operations Security. So, Operations Security fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for operational procedures and responsibilities, protection from malware, backup, login and monitoring, control of operational software, technical vulnerability management, and information systems audit considerations, along with different controls associated with these. You need to have a policy pertaining to daily operations, such as employee login, logout time. You need to have a solid backup plan defined with clearly mentioned RTO and RPO. You need to have a Security Operations Center, SOC, to monitor the security events. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. A13, Communications Security. So, Communications Security fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for network security management and information transfer, along with different controls associated with these. You need to mention what are the policies for network security. Like, is there any DMZ set, any firewall set to protect the network? Is there any enterprise network architecture documented? And how the information transfer is handled? Like, is there any data loss program or digital rights management set for the information dissemination? A14. System acquisition, development and maintenance. So, system acquisition, development and maintenance fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for security requirements of information systems, security in development and support processes, and test data, along with different controls associated with these. So here, you need to have a policy to restrict the changes to software packages and secure system engineering principles. Your application should be developed in a way that they should be portable and interoperable. You should always test your application in different environments. And yes, they should all be documented and have a solid policy around it. A15, supplier relationships. So, supplier relationships fundamentally mentions the objective of having policies for information security in supplier relationships and supplier service delivery management, along with different controls associated with these. Again, this part is crucial but undermined. You should have a clearly defined policy for supplier relationship management, clearly outline the strategical planning for and managing of all interactions with third-party organizations that supply goods and or services to an organization in order to maximize the value of those interactions. Relationships should be strong and deep, and proper attention should be given to security, like what you pay, what you get, and continual evaluation of the risks for the suppliers. I can also suggest that to have a dedicated SRM process is a worthy investment. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. Good going. Keep up the momentum. You are doing well. Keep learning and see you in the next lecture. Welcome. Good to have you back. So, let's discuss about the next control, that is information security incident management. So, information security incident management fundamentally mentions the objective for having policies for reporting information security events and weaknesses, management of information security incidents and improvements, and different controls associated with it. We will discuss these later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. Let's discuss about the next control, that is business continuity management. So, business continuity management fundamentally mentions the objective for having policies for information security aspects of business continuity management and different controls associated with it. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls. Let's discuss about the next control, that is compliance. So, compliance fundamentally mentions the objective for having policies for compliance with legal requirements, compliance with security policies and standards, and technical compliance, information systems, audit considerations, and different controls associated with it. We will discuss this later in detail when we delve more into the specific controls.
Hi there, welcome to the lecture. So, let's delve more into the information security controls as defined and outlined by ISO IEC 27001. Okay, so let's first discuss about A5 security policy. So, security policy fundamentally mentions the need of having the information security policy and different controls to be associated with it. The objective of this policy is to provide management direction and support for information security in accordance with business requirements and relevant laws and regulations. You need to have policies not only for creating an information security policy document, but also for reviewing the information security document. An information security policy which is not updated on a time-to-time basis gets irrelevant. When you create an information security policy, make sure that the security policy document is to be approved by management and published and communicated to all employees and relevant external parties. Everyone needs to be aware about the proper implementation of the policies. Don't hesitate to take approval from the negative stakeholders as well. Convince the negative stakeholders about the benefits of having an information security policy. Okay, so going by my experience, I hardly see that anyone in the organization will not support to have an information security document. When you are done with the creation of the document, make sure the information security policy is reviewed at planned intervals or if significant changes occur to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy and effectiveness. You remember what I said in my last lecture, yeah? The information security policy should be a living document. Keep learning. See you in the next lecture. Okay, so let's discuss about organization of information security. So, organization of information security policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for internal organization, external parties, and different controls to be associated with it. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy, internal organization, is to manage information security within the organization. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the management commitment to information security, but also for information security coordination, allocation of information security responsibilities, authorization process for information processing facilities, confidentiality agreements, contact with authorities, contact with special interest groups, and independent review of information security. When you create policy for internal organization, make sure that management shall actively support security within the organization through clear direction, demonstrated commitment, explicit assignment, and acknowledgement of information security responsibilities. Information security activities shall be coordinated by representatives from different parts of the organization with relevant roles and job functions. All information security responsibilities shall be clearly defined. A management authorization process for new information processing facilities shall be defined and implemented. Requirements for confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements reflecting the organization's needs for the protection of information shall be identified and regularly reviewed. appropriate contacts with relevant authorities shall be maintained. Appropriate contacts with special interest groups or other specialist security forums and professional associations shall be maintained. And the organization's approach to managing information security and its implementation, i.e., control objectives, controls, policies, processes, and procedures for information security shall be reviewed independently at planned intervals or when significant changes to the security implementation occur. The objective of the policy external parties is to maintain the security of the organization's information and information processing facilities that are accessed, processed, communicated to, or managed by external parties. You need to have a policy mentioning the identification of risks related to external parties, but also for addressing security when dealing with customers and addressing security in third-party agreements. When you create policy for external parties, make sure that the risks to the organization's information and information processing facilities from business processes involving external parties shall be identified and appropriate controls implemented before granting access. All identified security requirements shall be addressed before giving customers access to the organization's information or assets. And agreements with third parties involving accessing, processing, communicating, or managing the organization's information or information processing facilities, or adding products or services to information processing facilities shall cover all relevant security requirements. So, do you remember I asked you a question during the introduction? So, whose roles and responsibilities are information security? I get multiple answers for this, like it's everyone's responsibility or it's management's responsibility. Information security is everyone's responsibility. At the same time, the information security within an internal organization should follow a top-down approach. The higher management should educate the lower management people. Do you remember? Lead by example. Yeah, this fits into that. At the same time, you should only make one person accountable to maintain and disseminate the information security. It may be from the board of directors or executive committees. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome to the lecture. Okay, so let's first discuss about human resources security. So, human resources security policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for prior to employment, during employment, termination or change of employment, and different controls to be associated with it. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy prior to employment is to ensure that employees, contractors, and third-party users understand their responsibilities and are suitable for the roles they are considered for, and to reduce the risk of theft, fraud, or misuse of facilities. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the roles and responsibilities, but also for screening and terms and conditions of employment. When you create policy for prior to employment, make sure that security roles and responsibilities of employees, contractors, and third-party users shall be defined and documented in accordance with the organization's information security policy. Background verification checks on all candidates for employment, contractors, and third-party users shall be carried out in accordance with relevant laws, regulations and ethics, and proportional to the business requirements, the classification of the information to be accessed and the perceived risks, and as part of their contractual obligation, employees, contractors and third-party users shall agree and sign the terms and conditions of the employment contract, which shall state their and the organisation's responsibilities for information security. The objective of the policy during employment is to ensure that all employees, contractors and third-party users are aware of information security threats and concerns, their responsibilities and liabilities, and are equipped to support organisational security policy in the course of their normal work and to reduce the risk of human error. You need to have a policy mentioning the management responsibilities, but also for information security awareness, education and training, and disciplinary process. When you create policy for during employment, make sure that management shall require employees, contractors, and third-party users to apply security in accordance with established policies and procedures of the organisation. All employees of the organisation and, where relevant, contractors and third-party users shall receive appropriate awareness training and regular updates in organisational policies and procedures as relevant for their job function, and there shall be a formal disciplinary process for employees who have committed a security breach. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome back. When you create policy for termination or change of employment, make sure that responsibilities for performing employment termination or change of employment shall be clearly defined and assigned. All employees, contractors and third-party users shall return all the organisation's assets in their possession upon termination of their employment, contract or agreement, and the access rights of all employees, contractors and third-party users to information and information processing facilities shall be removed upon termination of their employment, contract or agreement, or adjusted upon change. Let me also brief you about Project Human Resource Management. Project Human Resource Management involves organising and managing a project team. The team is usually made up of people with specific skills and responsibilities. The project team, also known as project staff, should be involved in plans and decision making from the beginning of the project. Team members should feel invested in the outcome of the project. This will increase loyalty and commitment to project goals and objectives. The number of team members and their responsibilities can change as a project develops. The project management team, also called the core, executive or leadership team, is responsible for project planning, controlling and closing, and takes directives from the project team. Smaller project responsibilities can be shared by the team or designated by the project manager. The project management team and the project sponsor work together to secure funding, simplify scope questions, and influencing team members. Project human resource management processes include human resource planning, acquiring the project team, developing the project team, and managing the team. Processes are used multiple times, usually occurring at least once in a project or several times in different phases, if the project is made up of many phases. In reality, processes intersect with each other and with other phases and are not as definite and concrete as illustrated here. Project human resource management planning may be required if more experienced members are added to the team. The project management team should also prepare for risk management and changes to project duration. See you in the next session. So, asset management policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for the responsibility for assets, information classification, and different controls to be associated with it. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy for the responsibility for assets is to achieve and maintain appropriate protection of organizational assets. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the inventory of assets, but also for ownership of assets and acceptable use of assets. When you create policy for responsibility for assets, make sure that all assets shall be clearly identified and an inventory of all important assets drawn up and maintained. All information and assets associated with information processing facilities shall be owned by a designated part of the organization. Rules for the acceptable use of information and assets associated with information processing facilities shall be identified, documented, and implemented. So, all the company assets like servers, routers, switches, laptop, printer, fax machine should be properly inventoried in the document, and this document should be timely updated. Use SACM, that is Service Asset and Configuration Management Document, CMS, that is Configuration Management System, CMDB, that is Configuration Management Database. Listing of the assets without assigning someone to take care of it is of no use. Have a dedicated CMS manager or an IT manager. Please define a policy of AUP, which is Acceptable Use Policy, so that the employee knows what to and what not to do with the company assets. The objective of the policy, information classification, is to ensure that information receives an appropriate level of protection. You need to have a policy mentioning the classification guideline, but also for information labeling and handling. When you create policy for information classification, make sure that information shall be classified in terms of its value, legal requirements, sensitivity, and criticality to the organization. An appropriate set of procedures for information labeling and handling shall be developed and implemented in accordance with the classification scheme adopted by the organization. See you in the next session. Welcome back to the session. As already discussed, information classification is critical to safeguard the information. Organizations should have the mechanism or software that should always prompt an employee to classify the working document when he or she tries to close the document. If you, as an organization, don't implement the information classification policy, even data loss prevention and digital rights management policy will be of less use. Do a proper categorization of the document, have different categorization types such as unrestricted, confidential, highly confidential, restricted. You are always free to further subcategorize a type, like confidential was further subcategorized to internal use, editable, internal user, read-only, fully encrypted or unencrypted. So I audited a BFSI bank, and there I was asked a question. And the question was, what does ISO 27001 recommend? To have multiple categorization or multiple sub-categorization. So I recommended not to create multiple categorization types. 3 or 4 category types is fine. Try to sub-categorize those, but still this varies from organization to organization. It is high time I showed you a sample ISO 27001 report that the auditors create on the status of control and if any gaps. Out of multiple clients that I audited, I had to mark the status on information classification policy document as unknown while submitting the report. See you in the next session.
Welcome back. Okay, so let's first discuss about access control. So, access control policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for business requirement for access control, user access management, user responsibilities, network access control, operating system access control, application and information access control, and different controls to be associated with it. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy, business requirement for access control, is to control access to information. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies for maintaining the access control policy. When you create policy for business requirement for access control, make sure an access control policy shall be established, documented, and reviewed based on business and security requirements for access. The objective of the policy, user access management, is to ensure authorized user access and to prevent unauthorized access to information systems. You need to have a policy mentioning the user registration, but also for privilege management, user password management, and review of user access rights. When you create policy for user access management, make sure that there shall be a formal user registration and deregistration procedure in place for granting and revoking access to all information systems and services. The allocation and use of privileges shall be restricted and controlled. The allocation of passwords shall be controlled through a formal management process, and management shall review users' access rights at regular intervals using a formal process. The objective of the policy, user responsibilities, is to prevent unauthorized user access and compromise or theft of information and information processing facilities. You need to have a policy mentioning the password use, but also for unattended user equipment and clear desk and clear screen policy. When you create policy for user responsibilities, make sure that users shall be required to follow good security practices in the selection and use of passwords. Users shall ensure that unattended equipment has appropriate protection, a clear desk policy for papers and removable storage media, and a clear screen policy for information processing facilities shall be adopted. See you in the next session. Hi there. Welcome back. The objective of the policy, network access control, is to prevent unauthorized access to network services. You need to have a policy mentioning the policy on use of network services, but also for user authentication for external connections, equipment identification in networks, remote diagnostic and configuration port protection, segregation in networks, network connection control, and network routing control. When you create policy for network access control, make sure that users should only be provided with access to the services that have been specifically authorized to use. Appropriate authentication methods shall be used to control access by remote users. Automatic equipment identification shall be considered as a means to authenticate connections from specific locations and equipment. Physical and logical access to diagnostic and configuration ports shall be controlled. Groups of information services, users, and information systems shall be segregated on networks. For shared networks, especially those extending across the organization boundaries, the capability of users to connect to the network shall be restricted, in line with the access control policy and requirements of the business applications and routing controls shall be implemented for networks to ensure that computer connections and information flows do not breach the access control policy of the business applications. The objective of the policy, operating system access control, is to prevent unauthorized access to operating systems. You need to have a policy mentioning the secure logon procedures, but also for user identification and authentication, password management system, use of system utilities, session timeout, and limitation of connection time. When you create policy for operating system access control, make sure that access to operating systems shall be controlled by a secure logon procedure. All users should have a unique identifier, user ID, for their personal use only, and a suitable authentication technique shall be chosen to substantiate the claimed identity of a user. Systems for managing passwords shall be interactive and shall ensure quality passwords. The use of utility programs that might be capable of overriding system and application controls shall be restricted and tightly controlled. Inactive sessions shall shut down after a defined period of inactivity, and restrictions on connection times shall be used to provide additional security for high-risk applications. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome back. Great to see you. The objective of the policy, application and information access control, is to prevent unauthorized access to information held in application systems. You need to have a policy mentioning the information access restriction, but also for sensitive system isolation. When you create policy for application and information access control, make sure that access to information and application system functions by users and support personnel shall be restricted in accordance with the defined access control policy, and sensitive systems should have a dedicated, isolated computing environment. You remember, what did I say for this in the introduction section? Yeah, this part is very crucial. You should have a security principle around providing least access to your employee. Least here means only the access granted that will be required by the employee to complete his or her job function. No more, no less. As already discussed, have different types of security access controls, such as physical security control, technical security control, and administrative security control. Okay, so this is important. Employees' daily job duties should be segregated. A person whose duty is to raise purchase order should not be assigned the duty to approve the purchase order and pay for the invoice. In that case, the employee can himself or herself complete the full procure to pay cycle, giving organisation a nightmare for erroneous PO raised. If you have not defined the roles and responsibilities matrix, you are not SOX regulation compliant. So I audited a small firm last year and was asked the question. The firm explained to me that as they are new and still growing, they have only handful resources and these resources do multiple tasks. So they don't have any segregation of duties defined. How should they pace up with the ISO standard? So my answer was, of course, not all resources should do multiple tasks, but still you can identify some resources who will be assigned to do multiple tasks apart from her daily roles and responsibilities. Clearly identify those resources, assign them privileged access only when they do the task that is over and above his daily job responsibility. At the end of the activity, someone from the organization check whether or not the resource did only the tasks which was supposed to be. If yes, approve the activity logs. If no, ask the employee for the justification. That is also fine. By doing so, you are mitigating the risk of one resource doing multiple cross activities and going unnoticed. See you in the next session. So, organization should have a policy to review its employees' access on time-to-time basis. Also, clearly define the policy for the password. Make local security policy that is applicable to all the assets like computers, printers. Make group policy if required. Do you know from where you can check the local security policy? You should be able to see them by following the path, Windows menu, and then type local security policy. You can see there different policies pertaining to account policies, local policies, network list manager policies, software restriction policy, application control policy, etc. Try to open up the account policies. See different policies inside it, such as enforced password history, maximum password age, minimum password age, minimum password length. Have policies pertaining to the networks. Define the allowed traffic that has to be passed. Define a clear access control list for the traffic. Have both kind of rules defined, inbound rule and outbound rule. You can achieve this in a Windows system by the application called Windows Defender Firewall. Define application restriction policy. See you in the next session.
Hi there, welcome to the lecture. Okay, so let's discuss about physical and environmental security. So, physical and environmental security policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for secure areas, equipment security, and different controls to be associated with it. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy, secure areas, is to prevent unauthorized physical access, damage, and interference to the organization's premises and information. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the physical security perimeter, but also for physical entry controls, securing offices, rooms and facilities, protecting against external and environmental threats, working in secure areas and public access, delivery and loading areas. When you create policy for secure areas, make sure that security perimeters, barriers such as walls, card-controlled entry gates or manned reception desks shall be used to protect areas that contain information and information processing facilities. Secure areas shall be protected by appropriate entry controls to ensure that only authorized personnel are allowed access. Physical security for offices, rooms, and facilities shall be designed and applied. Physical protection against damage from fire, flood, earthquake, explosion, civil unrest, and other forms of natural or man-made disaster shall be designed and applied. Physical protection and guidelines for working in secure areas shall be designed and applied. And access points such as delivery and loading areas and other points where unauthorized persons may enter the premises shall be controlled and, if possible, isolated from information processing facilities to avoid unauthorized access. The objective of the policy, equipment security, is to prevent loss, damage, theft, or compromise of assets and interruption to the organization's activities. You need to have a policy mentioning the equipment sitting and protection, but also for supporting utilities, cabling security, equipment maintenance, security of equipment off premises, secure disposal or reuse of equipment and removal of property. When you create policy for equipment security, make sure that equipment shall be correctly maintained to ensure its continued availability and integrity. Security shall be applied to off-site equipment, taking into account the different risks of working outside the organization's premises. All items of equipment containing storage media shall be checked to ensure that any sensitive data and licensed software has been removed or securely overwritten prior to disposal and equipment. Information or software shall not be taken off-site without prior authorization. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome back. As already discussed, there are multiple areas such as AHU room, server room, electrical equipment room, and BMS room inside an organization, and access to these areas should be controlled and checked. Okay, so let me introduce you to 3 types of different security controls here: physical control, administrative control, and technical control. Okay, so let me share an experience with you. Last year, I audited a big data center. The data center was surrounded by a 30-foot wall, multiple doors, and full lit 24/7 electric supply, multiple CCTV cameras, etc. So these types of control are segregated as physical control. The facility used multi-factor authentication to get access to the data center, valid chip-enabled ID. So this falls under the technical security controls. All the resources who were deployed to take care of the servers were regularly updated on the IT security policies and made aware. This falls under the administrator IT security controls. See you in the next session.
Hi there, welcome back. Okay, so let's first discuss about communications and operations management. So, communications and operations management policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for operational procedures and responsibilities, third-party service delivery management, system planning and acceptance, protection against malicious and mobile code, backup, network security management, media handling, exchange of information, electronic commerce services, monitoring, and different controls to be associated with it. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy, operational procedures and responsibilities, is to ensure the correct and secure operation of information processing facilities. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the documented operating procedures, but also for change management, segregation of duties, and separation of development, test, and operational facilities. When you create policy for operational procedures and responsibilities, make sure that operating procedures shall be documented, maintained, and made available to all users who need them. Changes to information processing facilities and systems shall be controlled. Duties and areas of responsibility shall be segregated to reduce opportunities for unauthorized or unintentional modification or misuse of the organization's assets and development. Test and operational facilities shall be separated to reduce the risks of unauthorized access or changes to the operational system. The objective of the policy, third-party service delivery management, is to implement and maintain the appropriate level of information security and service delivery in line with third-party service delivery agreements. You need to have a policy mentioning the service delivery, but also for monitoring and review of third-party services and managing changes to third-party services. When you create policy for third-party service delivery management, make sure that it shall be ensured that the security controls, service definitions, and delivery levels included in the third-party service delivery agreement are implemented, operated, and maintained by the third party. The services, reports, and records provided by the third party shall be regularly monitored and reviewed, and audits shall be carried out regularly, and changes to the provision of services, including maintaining and improving existing information security policies, procedures, and controls, shall be managed, taking account of the criticality of business systems and processes involved, and reassessment of risks. The objective of the policy, system planning and acceptance, is to minimize the risk of systems failures. You need to have a policy mentioning the capacity management, but also for system acceptance. When you create policy for system planning and acceptance, make sure that the use of resources shall be monitored, tuned, and projections made of future capacity requirements to ensure the required system performance, and acceptance criteria for new information systems, upgrades, and new versions shall be established, and suitable tests of the systems carried out during development and prior to acceptance. The objective of the policy, protection against malicious and mobile code, is to protect the integrity of software and information. You need to have a policy mentioning the controls against malicious code, but also for controls against mobile code. When you create policy for protection against malicious and mobile code, make sure that detection, prevention, and recovery controls to protect against malicious code and appropriate user awareness procedures shall be implemented. And where the use of mobile code is authorized, the configuration shall ensure that the authorized mobile code operates according to a clearly defined security policy, and unauthorized mobile code shall be prevented from executing. The objective of the policy backup is to maintain the integrity and availability of information and information processing facilities. You need to have a policy mentioning the information backup. When you create policy for backup, make sure that backup copies of information and software shall be taken and tested regularly in accordance with the agreed backup policy. See you in the next session. Hi there. Welcome back. The objective of the policy, network security management, is to ensure the protection of information in networks and the protection of the supporting infrastructure. You need to have a policy mentioning the network controls, but also for security of network services. When you create policy for network security management, make sure that Networks shall be adequately managed and controlled in order to be protected from threats and to maintain security for the systems and applications using the network, including information in transit. And security features, service levels, and management requirements of all network services shall be identified and included in any network services agreement, whether these services are provided in-house or outsourced. The objective of the policy, media handling, is to prevent unauthorized disclosure, modification, removal, or destruction of assets, and interruption to business activities. You need to have a policy mentioning the management of removable media, but also for disposal of media, information handling procedures, and security of system documentation. When you create policy for media handling, make sure that there shall be procedures in place for the management of removable media. Media shall be disposed of securely and safely when no longer required, using formal procedures. Procedures for the handling and storage of information shall be established to protect this information from unauthorized disclosure or misuse, and system documentation shall be protected against unauthorized access. The objective of the policy exchange of information is to maintain the security of information and software exchanged within an organization and with any external entity. You need to have a policy mentioning the information exchange policies and procedures, but also for exchange agreements, physical media in transit, electronic messaging, and business information systems. When you create policy for exchange of information, make sure that formal exchange policies, procedures, and controls shall be in place to protect the exchange of information through the use of all types of communication facilities. Agreements shall be established for the exchange of information and software between the organization and external parties. Media containing information shall be protected against unauthorized access, misuse, or corruption during transportation beyond an organization's physical boundaries. Information involved in electronic messaging shall be appropriately protected, and policies and procedures shall be developed and implemented to protect information associated with the interconnection of business information systems. The objective of the policy, electronic commerce services, is to ensure the security of electronic commerce services and their secure use. You need to have a policy mentioning the electronic commerce, but also for online transactions and publicly available information. When you create policy for electronic commerce services, make sure that information involved in electronic commerce passing over public networks shall be protected from fraudulent activity, contract dispute, and unauthorized disclosure and modification. Information involved in online transactions shall be protected to prevent incomplete transmission, misrouting, unauthorized message alteration, unauthorized disclosure, unauthorized message duplication or replay, and the integrity of information being made available on a publicly available system shall be protected to prevent unauthorized modification. The objective of the policy monitoring is to detect unauthorized information processing activities. You need to have a policy mentioning the audit login, but also for monitoring system use, protection of log information, administrator and operator logs, fault logging, and clock synchronization. When you create policy for monitoring, make sure that audit logs recording user activities, exceptions, and information security events shall be produced and kept for an agreed period to assist in future investigations and access control monitoring. Procedures for monitoring use of information processing facilities shall be established and the results of the monitoring activities reviewed regularly. Login facilities and log information shall be protected against tampering and unauthorized access. System administrator and system operator activities shall be logged. Faults shall be logged, analyzed, and appropriate action taken. And the clocks of all relevant information processing systems within an organization or security domain shall be synchronized with an agreed, accurate time source. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome back. As already discussed, you need to have a policy pertaining to daily operations such as employee login/logout time. You need to have a solid backup plan defined with clearly mentioned RTO and RPO. You need to have a Security Operations Center, SOC, to monitor the security events. Have a dedicated IT operations team who would do IT operations control. IT operations control is a central monitoring and control function carrying out operations tasks such as console management, monitoring the IT infrastructure through various IT control tools and/or real-time reporting engines. Job scheduling. You wouldn't say it, but even in the 21st century, most IT organizations still have to execute various scripts and batch jobs, which have to be triggered manually at scheduled times. A good example would be middleware jobs, transferring data between mainframe applications and smaller scale ERP or human resources applications. Print management. Historically, operations management took care of centralized printing output. Nowadays, with distributed printing facilities, their responsibility shifts to various print management solutions maintenance. Backup and restore. After a few decades of distributed server philosophy, IT moves to central server control and management through various virtualization solutions. Backup activities are somewhat easier to perform, but there is still a lot of work around backup, control, restarting jobs, media exchange. This is an important task of operations. Maintenance activities. Operations performs infrastructure maintenance activities requested by the remaining two IT/IL functions, application and technical management. Operations is usually organized to work in shifts, so it can perform assigned after-hours tasks. IT operations management is a function. It leaves a lot of options open to an IT organization. It can be a department or a sector in large organizations. In mid-size IT organizations, it can be a virtual team consisting of application and technical management team members. In small-size IT organizations, competent service desk analysts can perform operations tasks during their regular shifts, escalating more complex tasks to on-call engineers or tech account managers. I have even seen mid-size organizations running service desks as part of IT operations. If you consider main objectives and purpose of functional units, do what works for you and your organization. See you in the next session. Hi there. Welcome back. Okay, so let's discuss about information systems acquisition, development, and maintenance. So, information systems acquisition, development, and maintenance policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for security requirements of information systems, correct processing in applications, cryptographic controls, security of system files, security in development and support processes, and technical vulnerability management. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy, security requirements of information systems, is to ensure that security is an integral part of information systems. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have a policy for maintaining the security requirements, analysis, and specification. When you create a policy for security requirements of information systems, make sure that statements of business requirements for new information systems or enhancements to existing information systems shall specify the requirements for security controls. The objective of the policy, correct processing in applications, is to prevent errors, loss, unauthorized modification, or misuse of information in applications. You need to have a policy mentioning the input data validation, but also for control of internal processing, message integrity, and output data validation. When you create policy for correct processing in applications, make sure that data input to applications shall be validated to ensure that this data is correct and appropriate. Validation checks shall be incorporated into applications to detect any corruption of information through processing errors or deliberate acts. Requirements for ensuring authenticity and protecting message integrity in applications shall be identified and appropriate controls identified and implemented. Data output from an application shall be validated to ensure that the processing of stored information is correct and appropriate to the circumstances. The objective of the policy, cryptographic controls, is to protect the confidentiality, authenticity, or integrity of information by cryptographic means. You need to have a policy mentioning the policy on the use of cryptographic controls, but also for key management. When you create policy for cryptographic controls, make sure that a policy on the use of cryptographic controls for protection information shall be developed and implemented. Key management shall be in place to support the organization's use of cryptographic techniques. The objective of the policy, security of system files, is to ensure the security of system files. You need to have a policy mentioning the control of operational software, but also for protection of system test data and access control to program source code. When you create policy for security of system files, make sure that there should be procedures in place to control the installation of software on operational systems. Test data shall be selected carefully and protected and controlled. Access to program source code shall be restricted. The objective of the policy, security in development and support processes, is to maintain the security of application system software and information. You need to have a policy mentioning the change control procedures, but also for technical review of applications after operating system changes, restrictions on changes to software packages, information leakage, and outsourced software development. When you create policy for security in development and support processes, make sure that the implementation of changes shall be controlled by the use of formal change control procedures. When operating systems are changed, business critical applications shall be reviewed and tested to ensure there is no adverse impact on organizational, operationals, or security. Modifications to software packages shall be discouraged, limited to necessary changes, and all changes shall be strictly controlled. Opportunities for information leakage shall be prevented. Outsourced software development shall be supervised and monitored by the organization. The objective of the policy, technical vulnerability management, is to reduce risks resulting from exploitation of published technical vulnerabilities. You need to have a policy mentioning the control of technical vulnerabilities. When you create policy for technical vulnerability management, make sure that timely information about technical vulnerabilities of information systems being used shall be obtained. The organization's exposure to such vulnerabilities evaluated, and appropriate measures taken to address the associated risk. So here, you need to have policy to restrict the changes to software packages and secure system engineering principles. Your applications should be developed in such a way that it should be portable and interoperable. You should always test your application in different environments, and this should all be documented and have a solid policy around it. See you in the next session.
Hi there, welcome back. Okay, so let's discuss about information security incident management. So, information security incident management policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for reporting information security events and weaknesses, and management of information security incidents and improvements. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy, reporting information security events and weaknesses, is to ensure information security events and weaknesses associated with information systems are communicated in a manner allowing timely corrective action to be taken. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies for maintaining the reporting information security events and reporting security weaknesses. When you create policy for reporting information security events and weaknesses, make sure that information security events shall be reported through appropriate management channels as quickly as possible. All employees, contractors, and third-party users of information systems and services shall be required to note and report any observed or suspected security weaknesses in systems or services. The objective of the policy, management of information security incidents and improvements, is to ensure a consistent and effective approach is applied to the management of information security incidents. You need to have a policy not only for mentioning the responsibilities and procedures, but also for learning from information security incidents and collection of evidence. When you create policy for management of information security incidents and improvements, make sure that management responsibilities and procedures shall be established to ensure a quick, effective, and orderly response to information security incidents. There shall be mechanisms in place to enable the types, volumes, and costs of information security incidents to be quantified and monitored. Where a follow-up action against a person or organization after an information security incident involves legal action, either civil or criminal, evidence shall be collected, retained, and presented to conform to the rules for evidence laid down in the relevant jurisdictions. You should make your employees aware about whom, on what number to reach, if to log an incident report. So, this was a query which came from the Incident Response Manager when I was auditing an FMCG client. And the query seemed to be very much appropriate. The query was how to make our employees aware about the initial steps to follow in case of incidents. My answer was, there are many ways, but the easiest way is to stick an incident response procedure pamphlet or document to employees' desks. Mention the emergency contact number to log an incident in that pamphlet. That is easy and simple. See you in the next session.
Hi there. Welcome to the lecture. Okay, so let's discuss about business continuity management. So, business continuity management policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for information security aspects of business continuity management and different controls to be associated with it. Let's break it down further. The objective of this policy, information security aspects of business continuity management, is to counteract interruptions to business activities and to protect critical business processes from the effects of major failures of information systems or disasters, and to ensure their timely resumption. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the information security in the business continuity management process, but also for business continuity and risk assessment, developing and implementing continuity plans, including information security, business continuity planning framework, and testing, maintaining, and reassessing business continuity plans. When you create policy for information security aspects of business continuity management, make sure that a managed process shall be developed and maintained for business continuity throughout the organization that addresses the information security requirements needed for the organization's business continuity. Events that can cause interruptions to business processes shall be identified, along with the probability and impact of such interruptions and their consequences for information security. Plans shall be developed and implemented to maintain or restore operations and ensure availability of information at the required level and in the required timescales following interruption to or failure of critical business processes. A single framework of business continuity plans shall be maintained to ensure all plans are consistent to consistently address information security requirements and to identify priorities for testing and maintenance. Business continuity plans shall be tested and updated regularly to ensure that they are up to date and effective. Your organization needs to take care of the high availability and disaster recovery HADR plan and policy as well. You need to have a solid backup plan defined with clearly mentioned RTO and RPO. Make sure to appoint a team of ITSCM experts, that is, IT Service Continuity Management, and design proper policies for IT continuity. Have a disaster recovery invocation guideline, index of disaster relevant information, IT service continuity report, IT service continuity strategy, recovery plan, test report, clearly defined key performance indicators, KPIs, for IT service continuity management. Have an easy to follow IT service continuity management templates and checklists. Include ITSCM risk analysis, IT service continuity plan, ITSCM report, emergency plan template, and protocol disaster practice in that. See you in the next session. Hi there, welcome back. Okay, so let's discuss about compliance. So, compliance policy fundamentally mentions the need of having policies for compliance with legal requirements, compliance with security policies and standards and technical compliance, and information systems audit considerations. Let's break it down further. The objective of the policy, compliance with legal requirements, is to avoid breaches of any law, statutory, regulatory, or contractual obligations, and of any security requirements. So let's discuss this in detail. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the identification of applicable legislation, but also for intellectual property rights, IPR, protection of organizational records, data protection and privacy of personal information, prevention of misuse of information processing facilities, regulation of cryptographic controls. When you create policy for compliance with legal requirements, make sure that all relevant statutory, regulatory, and contractual requirements and the organization's approach to meet these requirements shall be explicitly defined, documented, and kept up to date for each information system and the organization. Appropriate procedures shall be implemented to ensure compliance with legislative, regulatory, and contractual requirements on the use of material in respect of which there may be intellectual property rights and on the use of proprietary software products. Important records shall be protected from loss, destruction, and falsification in accordance with statutory, regulatory, contractual, and business requirements. Data protection and privacy shall be ensured as required in relevant legislation, regulations, and, if applicable, contractual clauses. Users shall be deterred from using information processing facilities for unauthorized purposes. Cryptographic controls shall be used in compliance with all relevant agreements, laws, and regulations. The objective of the policy, compliance with security policies and standards, and technical compliance, is to ensure compliance of systems with organizational security policies and standards. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the compliance with security policies and standards, but also for technical compliance checking. When you create policy for compliance with security policies and standards and technical compliance, make sure that managers shall ensure that all security procedures within their area of responsibility are carried out correctly to achieve compliance with security policies and standards. Information systems shall be regularly checked for compliance with security implementation standards. See you in the next section. Hi there, welcome back. The objective of the policy, Information Systems Audit Considerations, is to maximize the effectiveness of and to minimize interference to or from the information systems audit process. You need to have policies not only for maintaining the information systems audit controls, but also for protection of information systems audit tools. When you create policy for information systems audit considerations, make sure that audit requirements and activities involving checks on operational systems shall be carefully planned and agreed to minimize the risk of disruptions to business processes. Access to information systems audit tools shall be protected to prevent any possible misuse or compromise. As there are a multitude of regulations across multiple jurisdictions, organizations face challenges in understanding those. Finding which regulation is relevant for the organization and how to adhere to the regulations. And mind you, as difficult as it is for the providers, customers, and organizations, it is also regulators and auditors, as they need to understand and help organizations adhere to those new regulations, such as to understand the regulatory implications, provider capabilities, assignment of compliance responsibilities between the provider and customer, managing compliance and audits over time, in scope, out scope, audits, etc. Compliance validates awareness of and adherence to corporate obligations. For example, an organization falling under payment card industry needs to be PCI DSS compliant. An organization falling under healthcare industry needs to be HIPAA compliant. Audits are a key tool for proving or disproving compliance. So let's say an organization is PCI DSS compliant, but how to verify if so it's true or not? To verify that, auditors may ask for all the transactions that have been done in a definite time frame and can then audit that if all of them were cryptographed. Compliance is policies and regulations from governments, industry groups, business relationships, and other stakeholders. Compliance management is a tool of governance. It is how an organization assesses, remediates, and proves it is meeting these internal and external obligations. Let's discuss a bit about the audit management. Most organizations are subject to a mix of internal and external audits and assessments to ensure compliance with internal and external requirements, independently conducted scope of audit attestations. So, 3 years back, when I audited an organization which had subscribed to on-cloud services from a customer, I had to question that how cloud changes audit management. Auditing third-party providers is not one party's choice. In SaaS, where multi-tenant service is offered, customers should understand that providers can, and often should, consider on-premises audits a security risk. So customers working with the providers will have to rely more on third-party attestations rather than audits they perform themselves. As cloud providers understand that customers need assurance that the provider meets their contractual and regulatory obligations, they provide rigorous third-party attestations to prove they meet customers' obligations. These regulatory obligations can be based on industry standards with clearly defined scopes and a list of specific controls evaluated. Publishing certifications and attestations to the degree legally allowed will greatly assist cloud customers in evaluating providers. The Cloud Security Alliance STAR Registry offers a central repository for providers to publicly release these documents. Third-party attestations, non-disclosure agreement, NDA, STAR, attestations, and certifications. See you in the next session.
Congratulations on completing the course. I wish you the best of luck for the exam. If you have completed all the lectures and understood the subject matter and have gone through the standard guides, you should be ready to go take the certification. I wish you the best of luck on the exam, and please let me know when, not if, you pass. I hope you loved the course and look forward to serving you again in the future. Thank you.